Hi, we've made it to Tofino. It we didn't get much video coming in because things got a little crazy. Sometime I really want to be able to get video that kind of captures all of the um, things that go on a trip like this. Mostly for our friends and family can see the good and the bad. But unfortunately, when things go bad, getting out a camera is the last thing on our minds, and staying safe and not dying is much more on the front of our minds. Although,
For our friends and family. Not that we were in any danger of dying.
no, it was all good. But we sailed or motored into the night. Everything was just beautiful and calm until sometime on Beth's watch between midnight and 2.
About 1:30.
About 1:30, the winds finally picked up from the south, like the weather had said that they would, and we were all excited about that. So I got up at 2. We put up sail and turned off the motor, and it was gorgeous. Sailed along for about half an hour until the waves that the south wind were keeping up caught up with us and met with the waves that were coming from a different direction. I'm not sure which, and then we got really confused seas, and the boat
Pretty sure
started
we
to
had
roll.
northwest swells
Yeah,
hitting south wind chop.
yeah, northwest and then south, and then the boat just started to roll like crazy, and it would go way over one way and then way back the other way, and it just wouldn't stabilize, and that would there wasn't enough wind to keep it. Enough wind to sail well, but not enough wind to keep it from rolling back the other way, so that the sails would go all the way to one side and then slam back to the other as the wind caught them again. And it started raining. Actually, I think just before we put up the sails.
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
It was wet.
It was wet. It wasn't a bad rain at that point. It was just kind of misty and wet. And we had fun getting the sails up and getting everything set, though. It wasn't that bad then. But then the rolling.
Well, and our
really got
autopilot couldn't handle the rolling, so then we were hand steering.
Yeah, and then the autopilot, I kept trying to get it to work, and it just wasn't happy. And I was trying to find a course where the rolling would be minimal, but we'd still be going in kind of the direction we want to go. And then it just stopped functioning. I'm not sure why. It was still on and running, but it just, like, when you hit its compass, you'd say, go this direction, and it would just sit there. So then I ended up hand steering until 5 or 6.
Something like that.
And then it got light. It got light about 4:30. It was nice. Once we could see the swells coming, it was a whole lot easier.
Well, then we got the autopilot working again after daylight.
Yeah, about 7:30 or so. Then it just decided it wanted to be happy, and so that worked. Then the wind started to die down, and we got the autopilot on, or got the engine on too, and the autopilot started heading up to Tofino.
Yeah,
And we had pretty good visibility throughout the night. I'd say 4 miles at least. We saw one big cruise ship, and that was kind of fun to watch this big glowing ball go past us on the horizon.
It was also nice to see a ship so we could see how far our visibility really was. But
Yeah.
that's the only ship I saw since we left the Strait
Yeah,
all night long. So it was a very, very dark night.
yeah. And but then just as we were nearing the coast, the rain picked up and just started dumping, just buckets and buckets.
We're both
And
clean today.
the wind was blowing, and it was coming in the companionway, it's coming up underneath the Dodger a little bit, and visibility dropped to about half a mile or something. It's kind of a tricky entrance getting into Tofino. There's a bunch of points sticking out and rocks, and you got to find the entrance through. There's a lighthouse on one of the rocks.
But during the daylight, the lighthouse, you can't really see the light from too far away in the low visibility. And once we got up close, then we could see the actual lighthouse on the rock, but it didn't help from very far away.
Yeah.
So we had to get up pretty close to see what was going on.
And so Beth was doing the navigation with the charts and GPS, and so she was taking fixes every couple of minutes to tell where we were at, and feeding me compass directions to steer, and GPS. The GPS just has lat and long on it, so she would say, stay at 54 west, and don't go above 55, don't go below 53, and try and hold right at 54, and then you should be good. And she would keep updating that as we moved along. She kept popping her head up and saying, as different pieces of land sort of slowly came into visibility, she'd pop her head up and be like, "Oh, yep, this looks just right." And I'm like, "Really? Okay, I'll just keep doing what you say then." And
we talked about it last night, how we were both really grateful for the other person's work. A few times, both of us had some uncertainties, and we were able to express that to the other person and then try to figure out what was going on together. And it was nice to be able to have another person to bounce something off of. If I felt like I wasn't sure, I could ask him, and we could put both of our brains to work on it. So it made coming in a lot less scary to be doing it with two people. Of course, I didn't mind having the down below job because then I got to stay a little bit drier. Though I was dripping all over the charts anyway.
I got soaked. The time we got in, I feel that the entire time we felt like we were safe. We could see enough to tell where the rocks were. We could see that we were still in deep water the whole time. I never felt like we were in danger. It was just stressful because we don't know the area, but I felt like we did a good job with that. But yeah, throughout the night I just got completely soaked. Just about everything I owned was wet. I had one pair of jeans that got wet later, but I was able to change into when we got here. A few t-shirts, and that was it. All my long sleeve shirts, my sweaters, my coats, everything was just drenched. I did 2 loads of laundry, mostly of just our laundry that was wet when we got into the marina.
Mostly yours.
To dry it. And most of it was mine. So on my Christmas list, for anybody that wants to know, wool, preferably already spun and knitted into things, wool clothing, and better foul weather gear. Those are the 2 things that I think we both really need more
Whereas
of.
I had stopped at the store and picked up some new rain pants and some nice long underwear before I came, and I had a couple of jackets and a couple of wool sweaters, and I did a little bit better than Brian, I think.
I left my good hiking boots at home because I thought, well, they're getting kind of old and they were dirty from working in the yard, and I thought, I'm not going to do any real hiking on this trip. I'll just take my tennis shoes and my Keens. I'll be good. And then in the middle of the night when it was raining, I realized, oh yeah, my hiking boots are the waterproof ones. So now my tennis shoes are totally soaked.
And I only brought one pair of shoes because last year when we were out for 3 weeks, I brought that one pair of shoes and wore them all the time. They dry really fast if I get them wet. It wasn't any problem at all. But last night after we came in, I was squelching around in my one wet pair of shoes and wishing I maybe brought just one more. I did steal Mira's jacket after we got in because Hannah's had gotten wet in some of the spray, and Mira's was the only dry one, so I stuck it on to go for a little while.
So we got into Tofino, and we found a spot in the marina. It's packed. There's not a whole lot of space here for cruising boats, but we found a little spot.
The fishing seasons haven't started yet, so a lot of the public docks are just full of commercial fishing boats that aren't able to be out, which is why we had such a dark and lonely night last night, but it also means full docks when we come in.
But I was really wanting easy access to a dryer because everything was wet and I didn't want to have to row it over in the dinghy. So I was glad we found a spot. And just as we pulled up, a nice gentleman from a boat next to us poked his head out, and it was still raining and cold and windy, and he came out and helped us tie up and said, "Can I get you a cup of tea?"
I already put the kettle on. I've got the heater on down below.
Oh, yes, please. The girls were actually still asleep. We got in at like 10? 11. Mira had been up till almost 2 o'clock in the morning doing fixes for us.
And Hannah's response to seasickness is just to sleep. So she'd been sleeping for like 30 of the last 36 hours.
Yeah, so we left them here and went next door, just the 2 of us, and there's a nice warm boat and had some tea, which was fantastic because our boat, everything was soaked and there was nowhere to sit down and you couldn't move with all this stuff everywhere. So that was pleasant, just to have a few minutes to warm up and relax before we tackled cleaning things up. So.
But now things are almost all dry. We've either tossed them in the dryer or hung things all over the boat to dry.
We plugged into shore power here and turned on the electric heaters, little space heater that we have, and just cranked it up to top heat, and then opened things up so that some of the heat could escape. But that's really helped dry out just the floor, because we have carpet on our floor, which isn't the most. Now I kind of understand why hardwood is good on the floor, because you can mop up the wet, but then you slip on it too, I guess. So. But anyway, so things are drying out well.
So it was a tough night, but it was a good night, and we were glad to be in, and we were glad to do it together.
I'm glad now we can say it was a good night.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I don't think we would have said that.
I don't know. It was a good night. It was a miserable night. It was a good night to be done with.
Mm-hmm.
But we weren't terribly surprised. We expected that coming up the coast we were going to have some nasty weather at some point, and figured we were going to have some rain, and that we were going to have some bumpy seas, and so it wasn't a huge surprise. It hit in the dark in the middle of the night, which always makes everything more difficult. And Brian needed to go up onto the foredeck several times, and we have jacklines and harnesses, and so he was safe, but it's always just a little bit more tricky when you're doing that sort of thing in the dark. But we did it.
Ooh, the one cool thing I was working on was getting the sails set at one point. I had gone up onto the foredeck, and I have my harness on, and I have a tether that goes to a jackline, and it had kind of caught on. So I was needing to stay low anyway, because we were going up and down pretty good. And so I was needing to stay low, and then it kind of got caught, and I could just reach the bow where I needed to get the ties off of the sail. So I was kind of laying down with my head right next to the edge of the bow, and the boat was going up in these swells and then coming down, and just big sprays out. And we had there was a lot of phosphorescence in the water, and so it was just this glowing green sploosh right past my face, over and over, and that was really cool.
We did see some whales or orcas, perhaps. Mostly we saw their backs and their flukes as they dove, and we saw some spray a couple of times, just as we were leaving the strait in the evening before it got dark. And I spotted them first, and then they came back up, and everybody else got a chance to see them. So it was really fun to see a little wildlife. So the good and the bad, that's the way it is with sailing. But they say that the really bad bads, the really good goods make up for the really bad bads. So we found that to be true.